Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the USV Independence as the human fleet prepared to jump into Council space. 2 weeks had passed since they received the desperate message from Speaker Veltara. 2 weeks of frantic preparation, upgrading, ships and training crews for a war unlike anything they had ever faced. The human fleet was not large by Council standards, but it was different. 30 combat ships had been hastily converted from exploration and colony vessels. Each ship carried weapons that the Council had never seen before, designed by Dr. Lisa Harper and her team of scientists who thought outside the normal rules of warfare. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the destroyer USV Freedom, one of the fastest ships in the fleet. His crew was a mix of old military veterans and young colonists who had never seen combat. They were nervous but determined, knowing that they were humanity's best hope of stopping an enemy that had already consumed half the galaxy. All ships. "Report ready for jump," announced Communications Officer Linda Davis from her station. Carter looked at the tactical display one more time. The latest intelligence reports from Council space were not encouraging. 3 more core systems had fallen in the past week. The enemy was now within striking distance of the Council's capital worlds, where billions of civilians waited for evacuation that would never come. "Begin jump sequence," Carter ordered. "All ships, maintain formation and be ready for immediate combat upon arrival." The human fleet disappeared into the swirling tunnel of hyperspace, racing toward a battle that might already be over. Behind them, the Outer Rim colonies continued their daily work of building new lives in harsh environments. Win or lose, humanity had found a home among the dangerous worlds that the Council had thought unfit for civilization. The jump took 6 hours. An eternity for crews who knew that every minute might mean the difference between saving lives and arriving to find empty space. When the fleet finally emerged at the edge of Council territory, the scene was worse than anyone had imagined. The Kepler system, where the first human colonies had been destroyed by pirates years ago, was now the site of a massive devourer industrial complex. Huge mechanical structures orbited the dead planets, processing raw materials and building new ships. The enemy fleet had grown to massive proportions, with hundreds of geometric vessels preparing for the final assault on Council core worlds. "Jesus Christ," whispered Navigator Tom Wilson as he studied the sensor readings. "There must be 300 enemy ships out there." Captain Alex Turner's voice came over the fleet communication channel from his ship, the USV Vengeance. "Admiral, we're picking up massive energy readings from the enemy construction sites. They're building something big." Dr. Lisa Harper, who was aboard Carter's flagship to coordinate the use of her experimental weapons, analyzed the sensor data from her mobile laboratory. "It's a planet killer," she announced grimly. "They're building a ship designed to crack open entire worlds and consume them in hours instead of days." The tactical situation was clear and hopeless. The human fleet was outnumbered 10-1 by an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying much larger Council forces. Any conventional attack would result in the complete destruction of the human ships within minutes. But Captain Jake Morrison had an idea that was anything but conventional. "Admiral, what if we don't try to fight their main fleet? What if we go after their construction facilities instead?" Carter studied the tactical display. The Devourer industrial complex was heavily defended, but most of their ships were positioned to intercept incoming attacks from the direction of Council space. The humans had approached from an unexpected angle, giving them a brief window of opportunity. "It's suicide," said Captain Helen Parker from the cruiser USV Liberty. "We'd have to get past their defensive screen and attack their most heavily protected assets." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But if we can disrupt their production capabilities, we might buy the Council time to evacuate their remaining populations. Sometimes winning isn't about surviving the battle. Sometimes it's about making sure the other guy loses something important." Admiral Carter made his decision with the cold calculation that had made him a successful military commander. "All ships, prepare for attack run on enemy industrial targets. We're going to hit them where it hurts most." The human fleet accelerated toward the Devourer complex, using every trick of stealth and misdirection they had learned during their years of exile. They flew through asteroid fields and used sensor shadows to avoid detection as long as possible. Attack began when Dr. Harper activated her quantum virus weapons. The invisible programs spread through Devourer computer networks, causing confusion and temporary system failures. It was only a small advantage, but it gave the human ships precious seconds to close the distance. Captain Morrison led the first attack wave, his destroyer diving toward the largest construction facility while enemy fire lit up the space around him. The Devourer defensive systems were powerful and accurate, but they had been designed to stop Council ships that fought by predictable rules. Human ships did not follow rules. They used ramming attacks and suicide runs, desperate maneuvers that no civilized military would consider. When the USV Freedom's weapons were destroyed by enemy fire, Morrison ordered his ship to crash directly into the main construction facility's power core. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system like a new sun. The construction facility, along with the nearly completed planet-killer weapon, was vaporized in seconds. Morrison and his crew died instantly, but their sacrifice crippled the enemy's ability to build new ships. Other human vessels followed Morrison's example. The destroyer USV Patriot crashed into a materials processing station. The cruiser USV Victory rammed an enemy command ship, taking out the coordination center for an entire Devourer battle group. Dr. Harper's laboratory ship was destroyed when she tried to deploy an experimental weapon that could have turned the tide of the entire war. But the weapon was still in development, and the untested technology exploded in her ship's cargo bay, killing one of humanity's greatest scientific minds. Admiral Carter watched his fleet die ship by ship, but the tactical display showed that their sacrifice was working. The Devourer industrial complex was burning, its production capabilities reduced by more than half. The enemy would not be able to build their planet-killer weapon for months, if ever. "All surviving ships retreat to Rally Point Alpha," Carter ordered as enemy reinforcements began arriving from other parts of the system. "We've done what we came to do. Only 8 human ships escaped the battle. 22 vessels and nearly 3,000 crew members had been lost in the attack. But the Devourer advance had been slowed, and the Council worlds had been given time they desperately needed. The human survivors jumped back toward the outer rim, carrying news of their victory and defeat to the colonies. They had proven that the Devourers could be hurt, but at a cost that made victory feel like failure. Meanwhile, in Council space, Speaker Veltara received the first reports of the human attack. The news was transmitted by automated sensors that had recorded the battle, since no Council ships had been present to witness the sacrifice. The reports were difficult to believe. The humans had achieved in one desperate battle what Council forces had failed to accomplish in months of fighting. They had actually damaged the enemy's war machine and disrupted their advance toward the core worlds. But the victory had come too late. Even as Veltara read the battle reports, final transmission arrived from the outer Council territories. The Devourer main fleet had bypassed the damaged industrial complex and was moving directly toward the capital worlds. The enemy had enough, ships already built to complete their conquest of Council space. Veltara sat in her empty office, reading the tactical reports and casualty lists from the human attack. The humans had lost more ships in one battle than the Council had ever asked them to risk during their entire membership. They had died fighting an enemy that the Council had failed to stop, protecting people who had exiled them for being too violent. The irony was almost too painful to bear. The Council had spent years warning about the dangers of human aggression. They had written reports about the risks of allowing such violent people into civilized society. They had expelled humanity because humans solved problems with force instead of diplomacy. Now the Council faced extinction because they had not listened to their own warnings. They had not understood that sometimes civilization needed people who were willing to be dangerous on its behalf. Sometimes peace could only be preserved by those who understood war. The final message came from the Council's outer sensor network. The Devourer fleet had reached the edge of the core systems. In 72 hours, they would arrive at the capital, worlds where Veltara and the last representatives of Council civilization waited for the end. Veltara composed her final transmission to the human colonies, though she knew it would arrive too late to change anything. In the message, she tried to explain what the Council had learned too late. She wrote about the value of courage over comfort, of strength over safety, of people who chose to fight rather than people who chose to talk. The Council observed humans. "Leave," she wrote. "We thought we were protecting civilization from those who did not understand our..." The Council's message took 3 days to reach the Outer Rim territories. When it finally arrived at the human communication station on the colony world of Haven, the duty officer could not believe what he was reading. Communications specialist. Nancy Brooks read the transmission twice before calling her supervisor. "Sir, you need to see this," Nancy said to Station Commander Paul Mitchell. "We just received a priority message from the Galactic Council. They're asking for military help." Paul took the datapad and scanned the formal language of the transmission. The message was carefully written to avoid admitting any mistakes, but the desperation was clear between the lines. The same council that had expelled humans for being too violent was now begging for their violent nature to save them. "Send this directly to Admiral Carter," Paul ordered, "and make sure every colony gets a copy. The people have a right to know what's happening." The message spread quickly through the human settlements. In workshops and farming areas, in research stations and mining operations, people gathered around communication screens to hear about the crisis in Council space. The reactions were mixed. Some humans felt angry that the Council only wanted them when they needed something. Others felt sorry for the aliens who were facing such a terrible enemy. A few suggested that humans should stay out of Council problems entirely and focus on building their own civilization. Colony leader Mary Thompson called a meeting in New Denver's main assembly hall. The building was packed with colonists who had come to discuss what they should do. The debate was loud and emotional. "They threw us out like garbage," said mechanic Tony Rodriguez, Sam's younger brother. "Now they want us to risk our lives to save them? Let them handle their own problems." "But people are dying," replied Dr. Sarah Williams, who ran the colony's medical center. "These devourers sound like they'll destroy everything in their path. If we don't help stop them now, they might come for us next." Engineer Sam Rodriguez stood up to address the crowd. "I've been reading the technical data about these enemy ships. Their technology is beyond anything we've seen before. The Council forces never had a chance with their parade ground tactics and pretty formations. So, what makes you think we can do better?" asked Security Chief Carlos Martinez. Sam smiled grimly. "Because we don't fight pretty battles. We fight to win whatever it takes. The Council was always complaining about our uncivilized methods. Maybe it's time to show them what uncivilized really looks like. Similar discussions were happening on every human world. On the industrial planet of Forge, workers debated whether to retool their factories to build weapons for the Council. On the research station at Kepler's Edge, scientists argued about sharing their experimental technologies with their former oppressors. Admiral Ben Carter received reports from all the human settlements as he prepared for a fleet commanders meeting. The message from the Council had included detailed tactical information about the Devourers, and Carter's staff had been analyzing the data for hours. Captain Jake Morrison joined the meeting aboard Carter's flagship along with the other senior officers. The conference room's main screen showed star maps of Council space, with red zones marking areas under Devourer control. The invasion had accelerated in recent weeks, consuming entire sectors in days. "The enemy's strategy is clear," explained Intelligence Officer Ruth Coleman as she pointed to the tactical display. "They're not just randomly destroying things, they're targeting industrial centers and military bases first, then moving on to population centers. Each conquest gives them more resources to build additional ships." Captain Alex Turner, commander of the heavy cruiser USV Vengeance, studied the ship designs that Council forces had faced. "Their vessels are built like mobile factories. They can literally eat a planet and convert the raw materials into more weapons and ships within hours." "What about their weaknesses?" asked Jake. "Every technology has limits." Dr. Lisa Harper, who had been working with the technical data, brought up new displays. "Their ships seem to be controlled by a collective intelligence. They adapt quickly to new threats, but that adaptation takes time. If we could hit them with something they've never seen before, we might have a brief advantage before they adjust." Admiral Carter listened to the discussion and made his decision. "We're going to help them. Not because the Council deserves it, but because this threat won't stop with Council space. If these Devourers consume the entire galaxy, we'll eventually have to face them alone." The room went quiet as the officers considered the implications. Fighting the Devourers would mean taking human ships and crews into a war zone, where the enemy had already destroyed forces much larger than their own fleet. "Sir, what about the people who don't want to get involved?" asked Captain Morrison. "We can't force the colonies to support a war effort." "We won't force anyone," Carter replied, "but we'll ask for volunteers. There are enough humans who understand what's at stake. The colonists who want to stay and build their new lives can do that. Those who want to fight can join the fleet." The response to Carter's call for volunteers surprised even him. Within a week, thousands of humans had signed up for military service. Veterans from the old Council conflicts came out of retirement. Young people from the colonies enlisted to protect their new homes. Engineers and scientists offered to work on weapons development. The human fleet began preparing for war with an intensity that would have shocked the Council leaders. Factories that had been producing farming equipment switched to building weapons. Research labs that had been studying alien biology started developing new military technologies. Dr. Lisa Harper worked with a team of human scientists to create weapons based on the tactical data from Council battles. They designed virus programs that could infect Devourer computer systems and weapons that used quantum mechanics to bypass enemy shields. Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez led the effort to upgrade human ships for combat. The vessels had been built for exploration and colonization, but they could be modified with armor plating and weapon systems. The work was dangerous and exhausting, but the crews pushed themselves harder than ever before. Meanwhile, in Council space, the situation had become desperate. Speaker Veltara watched from the emergency command center as another star system fell to the Devourer advance. The enemy was now only 3 jumps away from the core council worlds where billions of civilians lived. "How long until our message reaches the humans?" Veltara asked Communications Director Mortek. "The transmission was sent 4 days ago," Mortek replied. "Even if they respond immediately, it will take at least a week for any help to arrive. And we don't know if they'll agree to help us." Veltara stared at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. The irony was bitter and painful. The Council had spent years criticizing human methods as too violent and unpredictable. They had expelled humanity from civilized space because humans solved problems with force instead of diplomacy. Now, facing an enemy that could not be reasoned with or negotiated with, the Council desperately needed the very qualities they had found so objectionable. The humans' willingness to fight dirty, to use whatever tactics were necessary to win, might be the only thing that could save the galaxy. Defense Minister Roltek entered the command center with the latest military reports. His normally perfect uniform was wrinkled and his face showed the strain of constant crisis management. "The evacuation of the Centauri colonies is complete," Roltek reported. "But the refugee ships have nowhere to go. Every safe system is already overcrowded with evacuees from previous attacks." "What about our remaining military assets?" Veltara asked. 15 capital ships and perhaps 60 smaller vessels," Roltek said quietly. "Most of our crews are either dead or missing. The few ships we have left are operating with skeleton crews and limited supplies." Veltara closed her eyes and tried not to think about how different things might have been if the humans had still been part of the Council when the crisis began. Human military advisors might have recognized the threat earlier. Human ships might have been able to slow the enemy advance while civilian populations evacuated. Instead, the Council had chosen pride over pragmatism. They had valued their comfortable ideals more than the harsh realities of a dangerous universe. Now they were paying the price for that choice, and the bill was measured in entire civilizations. The communication board chimed with an incoming transmission. Mortek quickly routed the signal to the main display. For a moment, Veltara hoped it might be a response from the humans. Instead, the screen showed the cold mechanical face of a Devourer probe. The enemy had never communicated before, but now they seemed ready to talk. When the alien machine spoke, its voice was like the sound of grinding metal. "Council species, your resistance has been analyzed and found ineffective. Surrender your worlds and populations for efficient processing. Compliance will result in minimal suffering during consumption." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun. The Devourers were not interested in negotiation or terms. They were simply informing their prey that the hunt was almost over. Veltara stared at the blank screen and wondered if the human response would arrive in time to matter. The Council had made their desperate plea for help, but they might have waited too long to swallow their pride. The Devourer invasion spread like a disease through Council space. After the Kepler colonies disappeared, 3 more systems went dark in the following week. Each attack was faster and more efficient than the last. The mechanical fleet learned from every battle, adapting their tactics and improving their harvesting methods. Commander Zixtal stood in the war room of the Council's main military base and stared at the tactical display. Red marks showed where systems had been consumed. Yellow marks showed where Devourer scouts had been detected. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The enemy was not randomly attacking. They were following a careful plan to cut off Council escape routes and isolate their strongest defensive positions. "How many ships do we have ready for combat?" Zixtal asked his aide, Lieutenant Korvek. 47 capital ships and 200 smaller vessels," Korvek replied. "But, sir, most of our crews have never fought in real battles. Our training has focused on ceremonial displays and anti-piracy operations." Zixtal nodded grimly. The Council Defense Force looked impressive during parades and Fleet Day celebrations. Their ships were beautiful and their uniforms were perfect. But they had been designed for a peaceful galaxy where the biggest threats were smugglers and trade disputes. The first major battle happened at the Nexus system, an important trade hub with a large military station. Commander Zixtal personally led the defense fleet, hoping that superior numbers would make up for their lack of experience. He arranged his ships in the classic Council formation, with the biggest vessels in the center and smaller ships protecting the flanks. The Devourer fleet arrived like a storm of geometric nightmares. Their ships were massive triangular and cylindrical constructs that moved with impossible precision. They did not communicate or demand surrender. They simply began their attack. The Council ships opened fire first, sending bright energy beams toward the enemy formation. The weapons struck the Devourer vessels but seemed to have little effect. The alien ship's armor absorbed the energy and converted it into power for their own systems. Then the Devourers responded. Their weapons were not like anything the Council had seen before. Instead of simple energy beams, they fired streams of nanomachines that ate through ship hulls like acid. The mechanical swarms spread from ship to ship, dismantling the Council vessels from the inside out. Commander Zixtal watched in horror as his beautiful fleet was torn apart in minutes. The careful formations that looked so good in training exercises fell apart under the Devourer assault. Ships that had taken years to build were reduced to scrap metal and floating debris. "All ships retreat to the backup positions," Zixtal ordered, but it was too late. The Devourers had already surrounded the fleeing Council vessels. Their ships moved faster than physics should have allowed, cutting off escape routes and hunting down survivors. Of the 50 ships that had defended the Nexus system, only 7 escaped to carry news of the defeat back to Council headquarters. The military station and the entire population of the system were consumed by the harvesting beams. Another solar system had been added to the growing list of Devourer conquests. Meanwhile, far away in the Outer Rim territories, the humans were building something new. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the construction site of New Denver, their third major colony on a harsh desert planet. The work was hard and dangerous, but the colonists seemed happy. They had freedom here that they never had in Council space. Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead as he supervised the installation of atmospheric processors. The machines would slowly change the planet's air to make it breathable for humans. It was difficult work, but Sam enjoyed the challenge of making impossible things possible. "How long until we can take off these breathing masks?" asked colony leader Mary Thompson as she joined Sam near the construction site. 6 months for basic air quality, maybe a year for full atmosphere," Sam replied. "The soil is already responding well to the bacterial treatments. We should have decent farming areas within 2 years." Mary nodded and looked across the growing settlement. Prefabricated buildings stood in neat rows, connected by covered walkways that protected residents from the harsh sun. Children played in enclosed courtyards, while their parents worked on expanding the colony. It was not comfortable, but it was home. The humans had discovered that the Outer Rim planets, the ones the Council considered too dangerous to colonize, were actually perfect for people who were used to adapting and surviving. The extreme temperatures and hostile environments just meant that humans had to work harder and think more creatively. Dr. Lisa Harper had established research stations on 3 different worlds, studying alien microorganisms and mineral formations that could lead to new medicines and technologies. Without council regulations limiting her work, she was making discoveries that would have taken decades to achieve in the controlled environment of council space. Admiral Ben Carter commanded the human defense fleet from his flagship, the USV Independence. The fleet had grown as more humans joined them from other parts of the galaxy. Word had spread that the Outer Rim territories offered opportunities for people who were willing to work hard and take risks. "Admiral, we're getting some strange readings from long-range sensors," reported Communications Officer Linda Davis from her station on the bridge. Carter looked at the display screens. The readings showed massive energy disturbances coming from the direction of council space. The patterns looked like the aftermath of large space battles, but that seemed impossible. The council had been at peace for generations. Could be solar flares or gravitational anomalies, Carter said, but he did not sound convinced. "Keep monitoring the signals. If they get stronger, we might need to send a scout ship to investigate." The humans had no way of knowing that the council was fighting for its survival. The quantum communication networks that had once connected all parts of the galaxy had been disrupted by the Devourer attacks. Each human colony was isolated, focused on building their new lives in the harsh Outer Rim. Back in council space, Speaker Veltara faced a situation that grew worse every day. Half the outer council territories had been consumed or evacuated. Refugee ships crowded the remaining safe systems, bringing stories of entire worlds being eaten by the mechanical invaders. The military situation was hopeless. Every battle against the Devourers ended in defeat. The enemy learned from each encounter, adapting their tactics and technology to counter any strategy the Council forces tried. Traditional military doctrine, based on honor and measured responses, was useless against an enemy that did not negotiate or show mercy. "We need to consider all options," Veltara told the Emergency Council session. "Our conventional forces cannot stop this invasion. We must think of alternatives." "What about the secret weapons projects?" asked Council Member Hickstar from the Military Research Division. "The experimental shield generators and the quantum torpedo programs?" "Both projects are still years away from completion," replied Defense Minister Roltek. "The Devourers will have consumed half the galaxy before we can deploy those weapons." A long silence filled the council chamber. The representatives who had once spent their time debating trade regulations and cultural exchange programs now faced the end of their civilization. Everything they had built over thousands of years of careful diplomacy and peaceful cooperation was being destroyed by an enemy that did not care about their values. In the back of the chamber, an aide whispered something to Council Member Vexara. She stood up slowly, looking uncomfortable with what she was about to suggest. "There is one other option we have not discussed," Vexara said quietly. "We could try to contact the humans." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Many council members shouted that the humans were exiled for good reasons. They argued that bringing back the violent and unpredictable humans would be admitting failure. Others pointed out that humans had shown they could not be trusted to follow proper procedures. But as the debate continued and more reports of Devourer victories arrived, the opposition grew quieter. The council faced a simple choice. They could maintain their principles and watch their civilization die, or they could swallow their pride and ask for help from the people they had thrown away. Speaker Veltara raised her hand for silence. When the chamber was quiet, she spoke in a voice that showed how much the decision cost her. Prepare a message to the human territories. Tell them about the invasion and ask if they are willing to provide military assistance. Make it clear that this is a request, not a demand. The message was prepared carefully, with formal language that explained the situation without admitting that the council had made any mistakes. It included tactical data about the Devourers and a summary of failed military strategies. The transmission was sent through quantum relay toward the outer rim, where the humans had built their new homes. But even as the message traveled through space, more council systems fell to the advancing Devourer fleet. Time was running out, and the council's proud civilization was learning too late that sometimes survival required the very qualities they had found so offensive in humanity. 3 months had passed since the humans left council space. The big meeting halls felt quieter now, though Speaker Veltara would never admit it. She sat in her tall chair and watched the other council members talk about small problems like trade agreements and mining rights. Everything seemed peaceful and orderly, just the way they liked it. But in a small office far from the main council chambers, Senior Analyst Morden stared at his computer screen with growing worry. The Altarian had been watching the empty space beyond council borders for years. It was his job to look for any signs of danger coming from the dark areas where no one lived. Most days he saw nothing but empty stars and floating rocks. Today was different. The computer showed strange energy readings coming from the very edge of known space. The signals were not like anything in their files. They were too strong and too organized to be natural. But they were also too alien to be from any race the council knew. Morden made the readings bigger on his screen and studied them carefully. The patterns looked like ships, but ships bigger than anything the council had ever built. They moved in perfect lines, like soldiers marching, and they were heading toward council space. He sent a message to his boss, Director Kexalon, asking for a meeting. But Kexalon was busy with a conference about farming methods and could not see him until next week. Morden marked his report as important and went back to watching the signals. Far away in the dark space, the first Devourer ships moved between the stars like metal sharks. They had no names for themselves that other races could understand. They were just hunger and purpose, and the need to consume. Their ships were massive geometric shapes covered in weapons and harvesting tools. They did not explore or trade or make friends. They only took what they needed and moved on to the next target. The Devourer fleet had been traveling for hundreds of years, eating entire star systems to fuel their endless journey. They turned planets into raw materials and raw materials into more ships. Every world they consumed made them stronger for the next battle. Their scouts had found the council space months ago. They had studied the defenses and the ship patterns and the way the different alien races fought. The information went back to the fleet commanders, who made plans for the coming attack. The council races looked soft and unprepared. Their ships were built for showing off, not for serious fighting. The first target would be the Kepler mining colonies. These were small settlements on the edge of council space, where workers dug rare metals from dead planets. The colonies had almost no defenses, and were far from any military bases. They would be easy to take and would give the Devourers useful materials to build more ships. Back on the council station, Morden kept watching his screens as the signals got stronger and closer. He had been sending reports every day, but no one seemed to care. The council was too busy arguing about new rules for interspecies dating and whether certain types of music should be banned in public places. Finally, Director Kexalon called him for a meeting. The older Altarian looked tired and annoyed as he read Mordoon's reports. His office was full of papers about crop rotation and water management treaties. Security issues were not his favorite topic. These energy readings could be anything, Kexalon said, not looking up from his desk. Maybe they are natural phenomena. Maybe they are echoes from old spacecraft. You know how unreliable our long-range sensors can be. Sir, the patterns are too organized to be natural, Morden said. And they are getting stronger every day. Something big is moving toward our space. Kexalon sighed and looked at the numbers on the report. Even if these are ships, they are still very far away. We have time to study them and decide what to do. Send the information to the Military Analysis Department. Let them figure out if it is worth worrying about. The Military Analysis Department was run by Commander Zixtal, a proud Zephyrian who had never fought in a real war. His job was to plan parades and training exercises for the Council Defense Force. Most of his soldiers had never seen actual combat. The Council had been at peace for so long that many people thought war was something that only happened in history books. Zixtal looked at Mordoon's report and put it in a file with other low-priority items. The commander was more concerned with planning the upcoming Fleet Day celebration, where all the Council ships would fly in pretty formations for the entertainment of important visitors. Making sure the ships looked good was more important than preparing for threats that might not even exist. The Devourer attack came without warning in the early morning hours of a peaceful day. The mining colonies at Kepler had no idea what hit them. The workers were starting their shifts when massive dark shapes appeared in the sky above their settlements. The shapes moved wrong, like they were not following the normal rules of physics. The harvesting beams came down like red lightning. Buildings melted under the intense energy. The ground itself started to dissolve as the Devourers began eating the planet. The few security guards at the colonies tried to send distress signals, but the alien ships jammed all communications. Within 6 hours, the Kepler colonies were gone. Not destroyed, but consumed completely. The planets had been stripped, down to their cores, and all the useful materials had been loaded onto the Devourer ships. Where 3 thriving settlements had been, there were now only empty shells of dead rock floating in space. The first rescue ships from the Council Defense Force arrived 2 days later. Captain Bextar commanded a fast patrol ship that was designed for chasing smugglers and pirates. When he saw what was left of the Kepler system, he could not believe his eyes. "This is impossible," he said to his crew. "Entire planets don't just disappear. Our sensors must be broken." But the sensors were working fine. The planets were really gone, eaten by something with technology far beyond anything the Council understood. Captain Bexatar sent an emergency message back to Council headquarters, but even he had trouble explaining what he had seen. Speaker Veltara received the report during a lunch meeting about educational standards. She read the message 3 times before she understood what it was saying. The idea that someone could eat entire planets was so strange that she wondered if Captain Bexatar had made a mistake. But more reports started coming in. Other patrol ships confirmed that the Kepler colonies were gone. Long-range sensors detected the strange energy signatures moving deeper into Council space. Whatever had attacked the mining settlements was not stopping. It was looking for more targets. Veltara called an emergency meeting of the full Council. The great chamber filled with representatives from all the member races. They sat in their comfortable chairs and listened as the military officers explained what little they knew about the attack. "We are dealing with an unknown enemy," Commander Zixtal reported. Their technology is far more advanced than ours. They can consume entire planets in a matter of hours. Our normal defensive strategies may not be effective against them." The council members looked at each other with confusion and fear. They had spent so much time on small political problems that they had forgotten how to deal with real danger. Some suggested sending diplomats to make contact with the attackers. Others wanted to move their families to safer systems. A few asked if maybe the humans would know what to do. Speaker Veltara quickly shut down any talk about contacting the humans. The council had made their decision to exclude the violent and unpredictable humans from civilized society. They would handle this crisis themselves, using proper diplomatic and military procedures. But as the reports continued to come in and the Devourer fleet moved closer to the core council worlds, Veltara began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. The enemy they faced did not seem interested in talking or making deals. They only wanted to consume and destroy, and the humans, with their strange willingness to fight and their uncomfortable habit of solving problems with force, were now far away in the outer rim, building new lives where the council could not reach them. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the big window of his ship and watched the council station get smaller and smaller as they moved away. The metal walls of the station looked cold and unfriendly now, just like the faces of the aliens who had told them to leave. His hands were tight on the rail as he thought about what had just happened. The humans had been kicked out of the Galactic Council. After 3 years of trying to work with the other alien races, they had been told to pack up and go home. The council said humans were too wild and too ready to fight. They said humans did not belong with civilized people. Dr. Lisa Harper walked up to stand next to Jake. She had her tablet in her hands and was reading the final paper the council had given them. Her face looked tired and sad. She had worked so hard to show the aliens that humans were smart and could help solve problems. But the aliens did not want to listen. "They really think we are animals," Lisa said quietly. She looked at the words on her tablet again. "The report says we are unpredictable and dangerous. They say we solve problems the wrong way." Jake made a sound that was almost a laugh, but not happy. "Wrong way? We saved their mining ships when the pirates attacked them. We fixed their food problems when the crops died. We even helped them make peace with the rebel groups. But somehow that was all wrong." Behind them, other humans were walking around the ship. Some looked angry and some looked hurt. The children did not understand why they had to leave their friends. The adults tried to explain, but it was hard to make sense of it all. Admiral Ben Carter's voice came over the ship speakers. "All ships, we are now outside council space. We are free to go where we want. I know this is hard for everyone. The council has made their choice. Now we make ours." The human fleet was not small. 50 big ships carried the families and workers who had lived in council space. 20 warships went with them to keep them safe. The council had let them keep their ships, but had made sure they took all their weapons with them. They wanted the humans gone completely. Jake thought about the last meeting with the council leaders. The tall blue alien called Speaker Veltara had spoken in her calm voice about how humans did not fit with their way of life. She had examples ready. When the food riot started on the farming world, humans had used force to stop them fast. The council wanted to talk and make agreements that would take months. When the space pirates attacked the trade ships, humans had hunted them down and destroyed their bases. The council wanted to offer the pirates money to stop attacking. "Every time we had a problem, you chose violence first," Veltara had said. "You do not try to understand or make peace. You see a problem and you attack it. This is not how civilized people should act. Jake had tried to explain that sometimes quick action saved lives. Sometimes talking took too long and people died while the council made meetings and wrote papers. But Veltara had just shaken her head. The decision was made. The security chief, a big lizard-like alien called Keltar, had walked them to their ships. He was polite, but firm. His soldiers watched as the humans loaded their things and said goodbye to alien friends. Some of the aliens looked sad to see them go, but they did not speak up against the council's choice. Dr. Lisa Harper had been working on a cure for a disease that was killing people on 3 different worlds. She had to leave her lab and all her work behind. The council said they would find another way to solve the problem. They did not want human help anymore. The science officer on Jake's ship, a young man named Peter Walsh, came to the window. He looked confused and angry. "Captain, I don't understand. We helped them so many times. Why do they hate us?" Jake put his hand on Peter's shoulder. "They don't hate us, Peter. They fear us. We do things differently than they do. When they see a problem, they have meetings and write reports and try to make everyone happy. When we see a problem, we fix it fast and worry about feelings later." "But our way works," Peter said. "Look how many people we saved." "I know," Jake said. "But they think our way is too dangerous. They want everything to be slow and careful and safe. They don't understand that sometimes the world is not safe, and you have to be ready to fight." The ship's pilot, Mary Thompson, called from the front of the ship. "Captain, Admiral Carter wants to talk to all ship leaders. He's calling a meeting about where we go next." Jake nodded and started walking toward the meeting room. As he walked, he passed families sitting together and talking quietly. He passed workers who were angry about leaving their jobs. He passed soldiers who were ready to fight if needed. These were his people, and the council had thrown them away. The meeting room had screens that showed the other ship captains. Admiral Carter looked older than he had a year ago. The stress of dealing with the council had been hard on him, but his voice was still strong when he spoke. "We have been given maps of the outer rim areas," Carter said. "The council says these areas are too dangerous and too hard to live in. They think we will struggle and maybe come back asking for help. I think they are wrong." The screens showed star maps with empty areas marked in red. These were places where no one had built cities or mining stations. The council said the planets were too hot or too cold or too dangerous. They said only strong people could survive there. "We're going to prove them wrong," Carter continued. "We're going to build something better than what they have here. We're going to show them that being different is not being wrong." Jake smiled for the first time in days. The council thought they were sending humans into exile. They thought they were punishing them by making them go to hard places. But humans had always done well in hard places. Humans had lived through ice ages and wars and diseases. They had built cities in deserts and on mountains and in frozen lands. The fleet started moving toward the outer rim. Behind them, the council space got smaller until it was just stars. Ahead of them was the unknown, full of dangers and chances. Jake looked at the empty space and felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt free. The council had made their choice. They wanted safe and predictable and civilized. They did not want humans around to remind them that sometimes civilization needed people who were willing to get their hands dirty and do what needed to be done. Now humans would build their own civilization in their own way, in places where only the strong could survive. And maybe someday, the council would understand what they had lost when they chose fear over friendship.